Welcome to the lesson. If you have a Bible, go ahead and grab that. We're going to be in the book of Exodus. We're going to take a kind of a 30,000 foot flyover of the 10 plagues and how those 10 plagues are a direct response to the 10 of the Egyptian gods. And so, again, if you have a Bible, grab that Exodus. We're going to probably start in chapter 7. So a little bit of context before we jump into the plagues. So God's people are enslaved to Egypt, and God decides, I want my people free from slavery. And so Pharaoh's treating them harshly and that sort of thing, and that's just not going to fly. And so God calls Moses, and he tells Moses to go to Pharaoh and ask Pharaoh to let the people go. And so this was God's message to Pharaoh from Moses. In Exodus 4:22 and 23, this is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. And then Pharaoh's response is, well, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I don't know the Lord. Moreover, I'm not going to let Israel go. That's in Exodus 5:2. So God's purpose then for these plagues and for this altercation with Pharaoh is that his name would be made famous. When Moses asks God, he says, when I go to Israel and I tell him that God's going to let him go, what should I say? Who should I say that you are? What's your name? And God's response to Moses is, tell Israel, I am who I am. I am who I am. In Exodus 7:5, God says, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord whom I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the people of Israel from among them. In Exodus 9:14, God says, I will send all my plagues on you, Pharaoh, yourself, and on your servants and on your people, so that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. So God's purpose and God's plan for these plagues and for this story is so that the people of God and even the people who don't know the Lord would know that God is God and there is no other. God is God and there is no other. And so with that, let's take a look at the plagues and the Egyptian gods that are associated with those plagues. So in Exodus chapter 7, in verse 20 and 21, Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded in the sight of Pharaoh and the sight of his servants. He lifted up the staff and he struck the water in the Nile, and all the water in the Nile turned to blood. And the fish in the Nile died, and the Nile stank so that the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. So God strikes the Nile. He turns all the water in the Nile and even in the pots and water that wasn't in the Nile turned into blood. And all the fish die and the Nile just stinks, right? And so this would have been a huge blow to the Egyptians. See, the Egyptians saw the Nile as life-giving. And actually, they had a god over the Nile, the Egyptian god Hapi, H-A-P-I, Hapi. Hapi was the god of the Nile. He was considered the father of all gods. He was considered the life-giving god. And it's just so interesting that in striking the Egyptian source of life, God shows that he alone is God of the Nile. He alone is God over the fish, right? Happy? There's no happy. I am God. God is God, and there is no other. And so God puts the Egyptian god of the Nile, Hapi, to shame. And then in the next plague, the second one, we find this one in Exodus chapter 8, verse 5 says this, Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. So God brings forth from the waters of Egypt this kind of flood of frogs, and these frogs are on everything. They're in everything. Says they're in their ovens. Says that they're in their beds. They're everywhere, right? There's frogs everywhere. And then Pharaoh goes to Moses and he says, plead with your God to get rid of these frogs, right? Like, obviously the Egyptian gods can't get rid of these frogs. So plead with your God. So Moses does it. He pleads with God to get rid of the frogs. And it says all the frogs died and they gathered them in heaps, and that Israel or Egypt stank, is what it says. And so in ancient Egyptian culture, frogs represented fertility and new life. And there was actually a god that was in the form of a frog. That god's name was Heket. And Heket was the god of fertility and new life. And so in bringing this kind of flood of frogs and then killing them off, God shows his power to the Egyptians by bringing the frogs, killing them off, showing that he alone is the God of life and there is no other. Plague number 3. In Exodus chapter 8, verses 17 and 19, Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff and struck the dust of the earth. And there were gnats on man and beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats in all the land of Egypt. And the magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats, but they could not. And so there were gnats on man and beast. And so the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." So Aaron strikes the dust of the earth, bringing forth gnats on man and beast. Says the text says, man, there were so many gnats that all the dust of the earth were gnats. Like, that's incredible. And so in striking the dust, God dismantles the Egyptian god of the earth, Geb. Geb was the father to Osiris, Isis, and Set, at least so they believed. And those three gods were like their three mainstay gods. Like, Geb was just no second-class Egyptian god. Like, this was the father of these three major gods. And so God shows Pharaoh that he alone is God of the earth. He alone is God of the earth, and there is no other. Geb who? Right? Like, come on now. Plague number 4. Exodus chapter 8, verse 21 says this. If you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants and your people and into your houses. And the houses of the Egyptians will be filled with swarms of flies, also on the ground in which they stand. But on that day I'll set apart the land of Goshen where my people dwell, and no swarms of flies shall be there. And you will know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. So here in this fourth plague, God brings swarms of insects. Basically, when you look at the original text, it just says that God sent swarms. It doesn't necessarily specify that they were flies or what kind of insect it was. But God sends these swarms of insects upon the Egyptians, but not on the Hebrews. And so, and then it says that Pharaoh has to plead with Moses to get rid of the plague. And so I think that this is a direct response to the Egyptian insect god Khepri, who is believed to actually have had the head of a scarab beetle. So the Egyptians believed that the scarab beetle was like this sacred creature, and Khepri, the Egyptian god of insects, actually had this head of a scarab. And so again, God shows that he alone is God over all his creation. Like, God alone created the insects, and God alone has power over the insects. God is God, and there is no other. Plague number 5. Exodus 9:3 says this: "Behold, the hand of the Lord will fall with a very severe plague on your livestock that are in the field, the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks. But the Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so that nothing of all that belongs to the people of Israel shall die." So God stretches out his hand over the Egyptians' livestock, and he kills all the animals in the field, but he doesn't kill the Israelites' livestock. Now, this would have been a huge economic blow for the Egyptians at the time. And so God, in striking the livestock with this plague, he shows Pharaoh and the Egyptians that there's nothing off limits to God. Right? This put the Egyptian goddess Hathor, who was the god of protection and economic security, and was represented as a cow, to shame. God just puts this god, Egyptian false god, to shame. And because God wants to show the Egyptians that he alone is the God of protection. He alone is the God of economic security. He raises economies and he collapses economies. God is God and there is no other. Plague number 6. Exodus 9, verse 10. So they, Moses and Aaron, took soot from the kiln, and they stood before Pharaoh. And Moses threw it in the air, and it became boils breaking out in sores on man and beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils came upon the magicians and all the land of Egypt. So Moses grabbed some ash from the kiln where the Egyptians had been baking bricks in slavery to the Egyptians, or the Israelites had been baking bread or bricks in slavery to the Egyptians, and tosses the ash from the kiln into the air, and God strikes the Egyptians with this plague of boils, which was like a skin type plague. And so this would have been an absolute affront to the Egyptian goddess Isis. Isis was considered to be the goddess of healing and was one of their major deities. And so God shows the Egyptians in this plague that he alone is the God who brings healing as well as plagues. Like God alone is the God of healing. God is God and there is no other. Plague number 7. Exodus 9:22. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand towards heaven so that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man and beast, and every plant of the field in the land of Egypt. So at this point, Moses stretches out his hands over the heavens, right? And God strikes the land with hail and fire from sky, right? Lightning, thunder, hail. This would have been an absolute affront to the Egyptian god Nut, who was the goddess of the sky. They believed that everything that came out of the sky was from the power of that goddess. And so God does this so that the Egyptians, again, would know that God alone controls the sky and what comes from it. There is no other. Plague number 8. Exodus 10:14 says this. Then locusts came up over all the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt. Such a dense swarm of locusts had never before been seen, nor ever will be again. They covered the face of the whole land so that the land was darkened, and they ate all the plants in the land and the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Not a green thing remained, neither tree nor plant nor plant of the field or anything, throughout all the land of Egypt. So at this point in time, Pharaoh's own people are pleading with him, saying, man, just let the people go. Like we have been devastated. Our animals are dead. Frogs everywhere. Bugs. I just can't handle it. Nile's bloody. Just let the people go. So Pharaoh does not. He decides, man, I'm just not going to do it. And so God commands an east wind to blow in to Egypt, this giant storm that comes out of the east to blow into Egypt and then destroy everything with locusts. Like whatever was left from the hail, gone. Locusts destroy everything. The destruction that was caused by the locusts would have been monumental. In fact, God says that even Pharaoh's grandchildren would remember it. This level of destruction and violence called out the Egyptian god Set. The Egyptian god Set was believed to be the god of violence and the god of storms and the god of destruction. And yet God brought this storm, this east wind that brought destruction upon the land, showing once again that he alone is God and there is no other. Plague number 9. Exodus 10:22. So Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and there was pitch darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light where they lived. So God brings total darkness on the Egyptians so that they can't even move or see for 3 straight days. Now this, once again, God puts an Egyptian god to shame. This time, it's Ra, the sun god, right? Ra was the god that the Egyptians believed was also creator God. He was the god of light and the creator God. And so God once again shows the Egyptians that he alone is God over creation and light. There is no other. Who, Ra, the sun god? I'm going to blot out the sun for 3 straight days. God is God and there is no other. Plague number 10. Exodus chapter 12, verse 29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. So he summoned Moses and Aaron by night, and he says, "Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel. Go, serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also." So in the last and final plague, God fulfills his promise to Pharaoh, right? That promise that he made when he first came to Pharaoh through Moses and said, look, let my firstborn go or I'm going to kill your firstborn. So God fulfills this promise by sending a spirit of death over the land of Egypt, killing the firstborn son of each family. Now, this would have been crushing to Pharaoh. This would have been crushing to the Egyptians. See, the Egyptians actually believed that Pharaoh was the son of a god. They believed that he was their divine ruler. They believed he was all-powerful and all-knowing. They believed he was mediator between the gods and man. They also believed that he dispensed justice and order to the world. Pharaoh's firstborn son would have ascended to the throne and become the next son of God. And yet God shuts the door on the Egyptians, shuts the door on their gods once and for all, showing them that he alone is God, he alone is all-knowing, he alone is all-powerful, he alone dispenses justice and mercy on the world. His firstborn son is the Son of God, and there is no other. There is no other. So, through the 10 plagues, God systematically dismantles each and every one of the Egyptians' top gods. And in his mercy, he shows them that he alone is God and there is no other. He says in Exodus 12:12, on all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. So, what's the takeaway for you and for me? What do we do with this? I think the question we need to ask is, who or what are we worshiping? Who or what am I worshiping? What household gods do I put my trust in? What household gods do you put your trust in? Is it economic security? Is it good health? Is it nationalism? Is it wealth? What is it? What is your household god? One thing is certain, God will come for them. God will come for your false gods and mine, and he will not allow his glory to go to another. And listen, this is a grace and a mercy for each of us. You can put your total trust and confidence in God alone because he is in complete control. God is God, and there is no other.